Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to begin the GPCOG Executive Committee meeting. Good afternoon. I'm filling in for Jared until he gets here, so Chris is going to be our step-in chair right now. So welcome, everyone. This meeting is being held in hybrid format as per our usual custom. You can find the link online at gpcog.org/agenda center. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment? No one in the room here. No one online.
We have someone online, but the hand is not up.
Okay. And next up is a nomination for executive committee member. There is a vacancy due to the resignation of Vika Wood from Chebeac Island. We have a nomination for Nathan Four, who's the town manager of Falmouth. So I'm just looking, we're taking a vote on that, right?
Yeah. I would love to move.
Okay.
Nomination of Nathan Four for Falmouth. Fill that term.
Does anyone have a second?
Second.
Go to a vote. Nat?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Looks like Kate is there. Kate, do you
Yes.
have a vote? Yes. And I'm also yes. Next up, I'm just looking for a motion for approval of the meeting minutes from September 5th, 2023. The motion. Have a second?
A second.
All right. Kate, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mark?
I abstain. I wasn't at that meeting.
Nat?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes,
Sue?
I understand that wasn't Jerry.
And I'm a yes. So not yes. Yeah. Okay, and then next up we have a presentation, a spotlight on Vision Zero for rural and island communities. Joining us are Rick Harbison and staff, I believe. Yeah, Lisa Sinclair.
All right, thanks everybody. Got kind of an ambitious task for myself. I decided I'm going to try and get you guys up to speed on all of our Vision Zero activities, and then give you a little bit of the basics of what Vision Zero is to. So I'm going to try and move efficiently. Give some time for questions at the end. So starting out with a little bit of background. We all make mistakes. And we could all probably relate to doing something like this at one point in our lives. Fortunately, in most cases, the mistakes we make are not life-threatening. They may be embarrassing, but that's about it. My recent mistake was I accidentally took someone else's shopping cart at the grocery store, which was kind of especially embarrassing because I had the tractor cart for my kids. This other person had the normal cart. Yeah, it was really bad.
Trying to give away the kids.
And then she came back later, like, "Are these your veggie burgers?" So anyways, we make a lot of mistakes. And in normal life, it's fine, but on our roads, it's different. You make one small move, one minor miscalculation, it does have the potential to be fatal. And I think we can all probably remember some near misses that we've had ourselves, some actual crashes. It's important to note we do not stop making mistakes just because we get behind the wheel. We're always making mistakes. And part of the reason why it is so scary out there is that by and large, our roads are not designed to accommodate those mistakes and to accommodate human error. In many cases, they are actually dangerous by design. And so for decades, the mantra has been to build roads straighter, wider, faster. The main priority being to move vehicles quickly and efficiently. The main enemy being congested.
That was
Um,
a mistake by somebody.
Definitely a mistake. So the main priority was avoiding congestion, not necessarily safety. And that's how we end up with roads like this that are 5 lanes wide, that have lots of complicated, ins and outs, and really overbuilt when you look at the amount of traffic that they experience in most cases. And then, of course, these roads come together at intersections like this, where they can be incredibly complicated and you're bound to have issues. As we all know, it's especially scary if you're a cyclist or a pedestrian. You don't have the luxury of a metal frame surrounding you. And in many cases in our region, we don't have adequate sidewalks, safe places to cross, bike lanes, which is also an equity issue. But yeah, it's you can feel pretty exposed out there when you're walking your bike. One way I like to think about it is that our roads are kind of like a dangerous job site. So if you imagine something like this with like rickety scaffolding and railings that are not everywhere, and holes in the floor, and instead of like really fixing those safety issues, our mentality has been, all right, just watch yourself, don't go over there, be really careful around those railings. That's kind of has been our approach. Not to belabor the point or anything, but I have been playing around with some of the AI image generators, and I typed in a typical road in urban America and a typical intersection in urban America, and this is what it came out with. So it's very car centric, not really like, can't imagine that's what we're after. Not very livable. It just sort of goes to show you how ingrained this is in our way of life. The result of this is very sad. So we have approximately 42,000 people die each year on our nation's roads. In Maine, it's around 170 per year. In the PAX region, at least, it's around 18 to 20. And then these are the total statistics for the PAX region since 2016. I won't go into it, but you can see we're not trending in the right direction at all. And so we need a new approach. The current approach we've been using is not really working. If you're a parent like me, you get these little safety guys, you put them out in front of your driveway. We rely on different driver awareness campaigns like Heads Up and Click It or Ticket It, and you have funny slogans on our billboards, and we do rely on police enforcement as well. And I'm not saying those are not important. They just haven't been enough. We haven't really moved the needle. We've neglected road design. We haven't really prioritized safety like we should. And so that's where Vision Zero comes in. And so what is Vision Zero? First, as the name implies, it's a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries. It was first implemented in Sweden in the 1990s. And I think the main selling point of Vision Zero is that it's proven successful. So it actually worked in Sweden. They dramatically reduced their injuries and deaths. It's worked in many countries across Europe. And it's being adopted all over the place in America as well. One thing that I did not realize at first when I started this work is that Vision Zero is a lot more than just a target or a slogan. It's really meant to be a culture shift. And so this is a common graphic that's used to illustrate the differences between our traditional approach and the Vision Zero approach. And so under the traditional approach, we've seen traffic deaths are inevitable. It's just the price we pay for the ability to move around so freely. Vision Zero approach is that traffic deaths are preventable and we can do something about it. This is a big one. Traditional approach really relies on perfect human behavior. Get behind the wheel or walk around, we don't make any mistakes. Vision Zero acknowledges that people make mistakes and that we really need to design our roads to kind of proactively identify what those mistakes will be and build in some redundancies so that those mistakes don't actually kill us. Traditional approach is to prevent all collisions. So looking at the whole network, where are the crashes happening, and focus on those hot spots. Vision Zero approach is really, we have limited resource. Let's focus in, hone in on just the places where people are getting seriously hurt or killed. Traditional approach is for individual responsibility. So if you get in a crash, it's your fault, it's the other driver's fault, somebody's at fault. Vision Zero approach is really acknowledges that we operate within a flawed system and we all share responsibility. So it's your own driver, like your own behavior as a driver, pedestrian. It's the people that design the roads. It's the people that design the vehicles. It's, being able to have like quick response times. We're all in this together, and we share. We need to share this ethos of safety. And then traditional approaches that saving lives is expensive, and there's a cost-benefit ratio, and we assign money to people's lives. And Vision Zero approach is really like it's not saving lives is not expensive; it's worth it. I won't go into this too much, but just know that the US DOT is strongly behind Vision Zero, and they've adopted Vision Zero as the safe system approach. And so that's the US DOT's take on Vision Zero. And they've got this graphic that they use to describe what the safe system approach is. Around the perimeter are the principles, and that's really very similar to the graphic I just showed you with the Vision Zero assumptions. And then in the middle are the 5 core elements, and the idea is that if you have all of those core elements in place, you're much more likely to reduce injuries and deaths and get to zero. So I showed you some examples of some unsafe road design. I just share some examples of what works. And so we know that enhancing the visibility of crosswalks improves is 42% reduction in pedestrian crashes, rectangular rapid flashing beacons up to 47% reduction, pedestrian refuge islands up to 56% reduction in pedestrian crashes. This is a big one. Centerline rumble strips, 64% reduction in head-on fatal and severe crashes. And then another big one, converting a signalized intersection to a roundabout up to a 78% reduction in fatal and severe crashes. So we are in the midst of a really rare and massive opportunity right now. It's with the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it's a situation where it's like the right thing to do, which is Vision Zero, also happens to line up with huge sums of federal money. And so through the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, where they've allocated $5 billion in apportioned funds over 5 years, beginning 2022. There's 2 major categories. So there's planning and demonstration grants, which are a range of 100,000 to 10 million. And then implementation grants, which are 2.5 million to 25 million. So the implementation grants, those fund actual projects like those examples I just showed you. So that is like the real golden goose if we can get that funding. The only caveat to that is that to be eligible for an implementation grant, you need to have an action plan in place that covers the region. But just to give you a sense of how big this program is, the first rounds, there's been 2 rounds so far. The first round funded 800 million to 510 communities across the country. And that the result of that is that more than half of the US population will live in cities or counties with a Vision Zero action plan in place. So it's pretty cool little factoid. All right, and then here, I'm attempting to give you an overview of everything that we've done to date regarding Vision Zero. So round 1 came out in July 1st, or July was the round one deadline. We knew this grant was going to be competitive, so we decided to get a head start on a Vision Zero action plan. It was a good call. We ended up being awarded the grant, but unfortunately, by the time the funds were not released until just a couple of months ago. And so we applied for the grant for the whole GPCOG tax region, but because we didn't have the funding released, we ended up focusing just instead on the taxes. So that plan was entirely funded by PACs and includes the PACs communities. What we did do, so when the funding was released, we were able to work with Federal Highway and change our scope to use those funds for the rural and island communities in our region to do an action plan for those communities. And so that is what I'm technically here to talk with you about, even though I'm going to try and give you a little bit more of a context. And then the round 2 deadline, because we finished the round 1, we finished the PACS plan in May of 23, so recently. And then because we had an adopted plan that made all communities in the PACS region eligible to apply for implementation funds. It also made us eligible to apply for demonstration project grant, which is a new category in round 2. And so the city of Biddeford actually applied for a multi-million-dollar intersection study, looking at like 3 or 4 different intersections, not looking at, but like, doing safety improvements at 3 or 4 intersections. And then we applied for a pretty big demonstration project grant, which I'll go into in a little bit as well. And the idea for the Rural and Island Community Action Plan is that if we finish it in April of next year or so, then all of our communities in the entire region will be eligible to apply for implementation funds. Okay, and so just a little bit more about the action plans. So Magenta Vision Zero Greater Portland, that's the plan that we completed last year. It was adopted in May by the PACS executive board, right? This is a committee, PACS is a board. And the Vision Zero for rural and island communities is the communities, the 12 communities in gray that are not part of PACS, but part of GPCOG. And so all action plans are going to look a little bit different, but the program Safe Streets for All grant, they'd like to see that your plan includes robust community engagement, has a strong safety analysis to it, that you're identifying priority locations and projects in that plan. So when you apply for the implementation fund, they want to see that those projects were identified in your action plan. They want to see that you have a way to measure progress, that there's a leadership commitment, that it gets adopted by a committee, and then also have an advisory panel. And so we're excited for the Rural Island Communities project. At first, I was a little nipped of like, I wish we could have just done this all together, one big region. But the more I think about it, I think it actually does make sense to focus just on the Rural Island Communities. Not being part of PACS, they tend to not get as much transportation specific planning. And then also rural roads, they have different challenges. You have typically higher speeds, you have more head-on collisions. There's a lot of fatalities that happen in the rural parts of our region. You have things like wildlife crossings, like you have twists and turns and hills, like they're just a different. It'll be nice to focus on the rural piece of that. And so this is our project timeline. We launched the project last month. Right now we're kind of raising awareness about the project, establishing an advisory panel. November and December, we're really going to be ramping up our public engagements. We'll be hosting some workshops, doing some tabling at events. January and February is going to be focused on identifying those priority locations, formulating some recommendations and action steps, and then March and April, we will be drafting the plan, and ultimately, partly why I'm here is that we'll be seeking the adoption from you all. This is the body that would adopt it. And we had our first event this past Saturday. We went to New Gloucester Fire Department's open house and had a table there where people could identify their safety concerns on a map and fill out a survey. We got to experience a live burn. It was always fun. The jaws of life. What's that?
That's not the barbecue for that.
It's something wrong with the chicken burger. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention the demonstration project grant. It's an exciting opportunity. So demonstration projects, you've probably seen these around. They're low cost temporary projects. They typically focus on bike and pedestrian safety. They're a way to kind of pilot different ideas on see if they work before like fully committing to them. This is another image of a painted crosswalk near my house on Deering Ave. And so we submitted a project to do demonstration projects at 11 locations in the region, to do road safety audits in South Portland. Most of those would be by the main mall area, to do a region-wide roundabout feasibility study, which I'm really excited about, and then to do more in-depth intersection analyses at 3 intersections in Portland, South Portland, and Scarborough that were identified in the action plan. And that total that we applied for is just shy of $800,000. I think we should find out in the next month or so. I'll have to check with Belinda on that. And Belinda was really just led the action plan for the tax communities, and I'll be taking the role of project manager for the rural and island communities. With Belinda and Chris and everyone, we still have a very large project team working on Vision Zero. Oh yeah, so I had some final thoughts here. We had a lot of work to do. One of the ways I think about it is like we inherited a house that has a lot of asbestos and lead in it, and like kind of need to triage. Okay, what's the biggest safety concern? Let's do that. Vision Zero is more than a target. It's meant to be a culture shift. And there's lots of money out there, and we're working hard to get it and to make our region a safer place. That's all I have. Hopefully I'll have some time for questions.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Thoughts, questions?
I had some questions.
Yeah, go for it, Krista.
So I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One, I see that the demonstration money is part of the planning money, and I understand you need to be part of an action plan in order to apply for the implementation funding.
Yeah.
If our community, Gray, is currently in the middle of doing a lot of similar work just on our own for our village, could we apply for demonstration money outside of this process potentially?
I mean, I think I'll have to look into it, and I can check with Belinda on like if you're eligible to apply for demonstration projects if you don't have an action plan in place. You would certainly be eligible by next year when we finish this action plan, and there may be other sources of funding that you could draw on. I mean, they are low cost, so you might be able to pull it off some other ways. Okay,
and then just kind of a follow-up to that, I noticed that you were going to be identifying priority areas as part of this action planning. If your town is not identified as a priority area, what does that look like? Does that mean we wouldn't be identified as potentially receiving funds for projects we're working on? Or?
It would just mean that so the priority areas are places that we would focus on for implementation funding, right? And it's getting into the weeds a little bit, but the way we are going to look at it, so there's a bunch of different inputs that go into that. So one is the high injury network. So where the severe and fatal crash is occurring, there's a risk network that Lucy puts together. There's the community concerns map, and then there's equity zones, and we kind of layer all those on top of each other to come up with what the priority locations are. And because we have kind of a weird region, like it's 12 communities that are spread out. They don't necessarily, Shadig Island doesn't necessarily have much in common with Gray or Bruce. And so I think what we're going to propose to do is look at the Lakes region communities together, look at New Gloucester, Gray, Durham, Powell together, and then look at the island communities together. And so within your little mini region, we'll look at priority locations.
Okay.
And I'd be shocked if there's not locations in each community.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap, especially as you get close to town lines, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that helps clarify that.
In this case, it sounds like priority areas are focusing on where accidents occur. We used to call them high crash locations, and I know you're being more broader than that, but
Yep.
I pointed out because it could be confusing for those in tax district who think about priority centers and priority corridors having to do with the community priorities as opposed to the
Yeah.
commuter priorities, if you will.
Well, now that I'm realizing that, I haven't spoke actually, because what we call them are critical safety corridors. Critical safety intersections. So it actually is a different name.
Yeah, so it's both where the doubles are, so that's good.
Okay.
All roads are eligible, so it doesn't have to be a federally designated highway system, or state highway system, could be a local road.
It could be a local road. Yeah, we are staying away from the highways, 295 and 95. But yeah, other than that, the whole network is what we were looking at. So
And what's the coordination or commitment with MDOT if one of our high priority, high crash locations, I forgot the term already.
critical
Yeah.
safety sections.
Yeah, the CSIs or whatever. It happens to be, at least in part, an MDOT maintained or priority or designated highway. I'm trying to figure out where the grants go to, or if there's matching requirements, how that all works if there's multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah. Me too, I guess. I don't know if I have the answers to that one. I mean, UDC will be on our advisory panel. I think in the case of this last implementation grant, City of Biddeford applied and they were at the table. Like we actually brought all PAX members together, from each community to discuss like which project we thought would be most competitive to apply for the implementation grant. And
So we didn't step on one another's, like municipalities didn't step on one another's proposals in the competitive process.
Yeah.
So, what is MDOT's commitment to this? I know that, coming from a rural community, we've had, at least one area, actually two areas that are, under MDOT control. And we have, over the years, requested multiple times to have, safety changes made to them and have met no interest whatsoever. So is MDOT committed to working towards this effort?
The director of safety is on our advisory panel, so that's a good sign. But yeah, it might need a little bit more of a culture shift over there as well.
So if, let's say, a community has an issue that they've been dealing with for years without cooperation or interest from MDOT, and they do an assessment and this actually rises to the surface as
Yeah.
a critical issue. might this project actually, bring them to look at it differently?
I would hope so. Yeah. And I think in some ways where you can take maybe, so if we identify a project like City Bitterford, it's in our plan, it's a strong candidate for implementation funds, I kind of feel like we can take the lead and say to me, DOT, hey, this is what we came up with, we'd like your support, and
We can help with, organizing regional support and communicating that to DOT, communicating that to our congressional reps. When it's in a plan, it has a little bit more heft than if an individual community is making the request. Sometimes we can't make any promises on that. But what's interesting about some of the federal funding is that the new programs, some of the programs have been designed to go straight to MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations, or straight to communities without going through DOTs. So, there's a definite culture shift that's happened at the US DOT around these things. And the state DOTs work very collaboratively with the US DOT. So one would hope that as this money starts to hit the street, that we'll have cooperation at the local, state, and federal levels to advance priorities. But there's no guarantees.
It's been our experience in Gray that if we can come up with the funding locally, the DOT is much more inclined to let things go through their process more quickly because they're not having to manage it.
I also think with that, we probably would want to, if we're applying for implementation funds, like have a regional project, so it's not just one community going out, not just Bridgeton looking to fix a spot on 302. It's okay, let's for the entire region, we're doing all these improvements on Route 1 through the entire region, and then maybe on 302 through all the lakes region towns, and have a really big product like grant with lots of individual projects that would be really competitive. So I don't, it wouldn't be competitive to, for Chesapeake Island to submit something for their ferry terminal, most likely for
By themselves.
a grant that starts at $2.5 million. So
Yeah, but, my hope is that this program and your influence will, shift the thought process of NDOT to be more responsive to communities who are trying to implement safety.
Yeah.
And if you could teach deer and moose how to cross the signs, that would be great.
working on a presentation then.
Yeah, are there any last questions for Rick?
Just one last
Yeah.
question. What's the application parameters if you had a project that you board should like bring it through you, Rick, or is there a window, like it's a fall window and a spring window, or how is that gonna work?
Yeah, the round 1 deadline was in July, the round 2 deadline was in July. So I think we're anticipating that the round 3 deadline will be in July as well. So yeah, and so when that comes around, I think we'll hopefully have this plan done. We'll have the other plan drop around, and I think we'll have to come to the table at that point and come up with some ideas.
We hope it'll be a regional discussion so that we can put our best foot forward with the most competitive set of projects.
Yeah, I do think it's a great idea as far as combining multiple communities and multiple projects and getting that into a larger number, because it does compete with other areas versus, if I put in something for $300,000,
Yeah.
it's not going to be very competitive to get something that is, well, years ago, we combined Portland and South Portland for pedestrian improvements and sidewalks and road upgrades, and it made us really competitive in that area. So yeah, that's a good thing. So well done.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Okay.
It's really addressed to Carmen mostly. My observation, having been involved with tax for a number of years, is these kinds of conversations and these kinds of programs change at DOT. That it's not easy, but I think it has been revolutionary the way they think about transportation planning and investment in the urban area, in particular now, differently than they did earlier in my career, which takes you back to horse and buggy. So anyway, I think it's really important that community and all the others be prepared to be at the table talking about it, because I don't know if the program by itself will change that much, but the engagement of the community we'll bring people in. And it's like the division engineer for your maintenance division has probably sat out all of these meetings forever because they don't have any shoulders on their roads, they don't have any sidewalks, they've got moose crossings that they have to worry about. So it's not applicable, and suddenly that's the conversation, and it does change things, so. I'm so glad you asked the question, because
Well, even if, it can also change the thinking about how we think about safety in our own communities, and we can change our reaction to those situations. So previous municipal governments in the area have always gone right to, we need a street light, we need a traffic light. And, you know, as we know, when you get out further out on 302, it's hard to qualify for a traffic light. And it might not be necessary. So this might expand municipal government's ideas about how to mitigate those issues. It might not need a traffic light, it might need something else.
right, and citizens too. I can tell you 15 years ago, I proposed a roundabout, they would have thought I was ready for the honey bin. They still think that, but they're into roundabouts now.
Thank you very much. I think this was really enlightening, exciting for us outside of the pack thing. Yeah.
Us too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So next up was Christina's report. Did anyone have any questions or comments? I had a couple.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
I was just curious, on the table where we listed the grants that GPCOG has qualified for.
Yeah.
One of them was Department of Economic and Community Development Tech Hubs, and I was just wondering what tech hubs are and who qualifies as a tech hub.
Chris H., will you take that?
What's the tech hub? I gotta find it.
It's on page 13. I think this is what we were calling hub and spoke.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, who would have known what that is? Nobody.
The names the names are, yeah,
The
anyway.
Department of Economic and Community Development has federal ARPA money to give away, and they've contracted with us to do a couple of different tasks. The one that's referred to here is an effort to help new businesses started during the pandemic, which have experienced COVID losses. You can imagine several ways you might have lost money as a new business starting off during the pandemic, but they haven't been able to qualify for any relief. And that is often the case because you needed 3 years of prior operating data to show the loss. So this fund is available for businesses in Cumberland County who fall in those parameters, new during the pandemic with an unreimbursed COVID loss. And we are helping to administer that. So that's what that is. You would never have guessed it from Tech Hub.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then just one other thing, you noted the Resilience Corps deadline was approaching and that it was open, but I think it closed on the 13th. So I'm just wondering if there's still time for municipalities to apply for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if it closed already, well, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but if there is somebody who is really interested in hosting a Resilience Corps, our priority is to make it available for municipalities.
Yeah.
So, you know, just, I'm going to note, is this an official, like, we'd like to,
I don't know. I
Okay.
just wanted, I was going to raise it with council, but I didn't
Okay.
want to speak without knowing.
yeah. Is that okay, Tony? Yeah. If any of you are interested and you haven't already applied, just let us know as soon as you can, if you're interested, and then we'll work with you on it.
That's all I have. Does anyone else have comments? Next up was the Executive Director Performance Goals.
Yes.
Attachment C in your packet.
Yeah, attachment C. So you at our last meeting discussed 4 goals and asked me to add one in about our region's performance under Maine Won't Wait, the state's climate plan. So I've drafted again, very short on this. It's the 4th paragraph down. So align the agency's work, meaning GPCOG's work, to support Maine Won't Wait. And the specific way that I'm proposing that you hold me accountable for is to integrate the work of GPCOG's transportation and sustainability teams by developing a regional roadmap for reducing vehicle miles traveled and also electrifying vehicles. We have some work being done on this by the sustainability team and some on the transportation team. And those two teams have recognized that they need to work together a little bit more internally. So by producing this roadmap, that will integrate the work of those two groups. So, you know, and if I could like simplify it for you, PACS works a lot on reducing vehicle miles traveled through promoting public transportation, walking and biking, supporting housing near where people live, work, and play. And the sustainability team does a lot more on electrification of vehicles. So those two things will come together to help meet the targets in Maine Won't Wait, which Maine Won't Wait has a vehicle miles traveled reduction target, and it also has electrification targets. So it'll be one thing. So it's really integrating internally what I'm proposing as a performance goal for me personally.
Thoughts or comments?
One's an easy one. I find it remarkable that we would produce a roadmap in order to reduce miles.
Maybe not call it a roadmap.
Seems like an oxymoron.
It's a complete street roadmap.
And this is all fine, and thank you for doing that. My question is a little bit broader, is how do we draw, or should we draw a distinction between goals for the executive director and goals for the organization? Because it seems like they're one and the same, and I don't know if that's the intent or not. I mean, I'm not going to assign you to, you know, do performance reviews on all staff every 20 minutes or something of that nature, but
Thank you.
yeah, I wouldn't want it to happen to me. So I have no beef with any of this. I just look at it kind of differently for some reason this time.
Yeah.
Maybe I was sober, who knows, but it's happened. So anyway, I just look at it and say, well, those aren't really individual personal goals for somebody. It might be more of a direction for the organization. Again, I don't want to make a change. I just want to observe it. Is that what your intention?
Well, you know, sometimes I struggle with the same thing. We have priorities for the organization that this body adopted for FY23 and FY24. And I think there are like 5 or 6 of them, and they're around transportation and housing and climate and things that the organization as a whole will do. A couple of years back, when you were talking with me about what you wanted out of me, some of it was related to things that you wanted me specifically to bring to members. So you asked, and I can't remember if it's in here or not, but you asked like for me to do a better job of connecting all of you with like the policymakers that I regularly interact with. That you asked me to elevate and I think build a communications team. You know, that wasn't exactly it, but they were things that I was going to do to either directly help members or to build within the organization certain capacities or things to do. So when I first tried to do that for this year, I kept some of that over, and I was thinking about the things that I personally within the organization have to make sure happen. And as the organization has grown, some of these are actually around aligning the internal teams that have become kind of a little bit more siloed as we've grown. So that's something that like I can ask the team leads to do, but I gotta just make sure it happens. So that's how these are drafted. Does that help?
Yeah.
Make it more confusing.
Well, I happen to be of the opinion that your goals ought to be to get the goals of the organization accomplished.
Maybe that should be it, which is like, make sure FY23 and 24 goals are done.
You're in charge.
Mess it up.
I mean, I thought they had really good alignment with the goals of the organization, and I would hope that was intentional, because that should be that should be your job. But I can see what you're saying also, that you'll be directing restructuring or realignments within the organization here as you boarded it. You did add the connecting members to decision makers.
Yeah, okay, I did have that, yeah,
One.
yep. Well, I could add something at the top, which says, you know, in addition to the, you know, Christina's responsibility to achieve the organizational goals, below are some particular goals for her, something like that.
I don't think that's it. I think
Okay.
that would be redundant. I'm
Yeah,
just making an observation that, you know, getting the roads plowed is part of my job, but my goal for the year might be assigned to me to, you know, show up with clean socks once in a while. They
you can assign me that
They set
one.
the bar pretty low and stuff like that.
Okay,
Any other thoughts or questions? We don't need to vote on that, right?
we do,
Oh, we do, okay.
yeah.
Can I have a motion to adopt the, as modified or I guess we're not making any modifications. To adopt the executive director's FY 24 performance goals.
So,
Have a second.
Second.
Matt,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes,
Jerry,
Yes.
Carmen,
yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. Okay, next up is advocacy priorities. Were you going over that just
Oh, sorry, that's Chris Hall.
Okay.
There you go. Didn't know if you were gonna do it.
Nope, no, please.
Your printed agenda on page 2 has a summary of the 5 advocacy priorities that you approved last year at this time. And also a quick synopsis of activity in the legislature that we did during the 23 session. You see, we supported 13 bills, 6 became law, 7 got carried over. So we were particularly pleased to see progress on regional implementation, which is a work in progress, but was good to see that continuing to move forward. And also, we were really pleased to see the governor create an Office of New Americans. She did that by executive order, not by legislation. And I'm sure that many of you have met, or many of you will have an opportunity to provide Hannah Pingree in the office of the governor's Office of Policy and Innovation in the future. Some input on what the Office of New Americans should do. That there's no consensus on that. Going into the 24th session, we have a short session. It ends in April by statute. We'll see if it actually ends in April. There will be a supplemental budget, and so far there is still extra money coming into the state. As a matter of fact, the state's rainy day fund is full, which is a real accomplishment. And I think it's like $950 million in reserves. Very good, making all the bond agencies, rating agencies very happy. And I think there'll be more money to spend, so there'll be a conversation about what to do with it. And the priorities that we have outlined here are to continue the conversation around regional implementation. There's a carryover bill, LD 602, that would, for the first time ever, actually provide funding to all the regional planning organizations in Maine so that they can be partners implementing state policies and to provide services to towns that they can't do by themselves. Many small towns, for instance, would love to have help with getting grants, but there's no funding to help communities do that. This could be one of the uses that the money that's requested in LD 602 would provide. So we're anxious to pursue that. We also have as a second priority, the continuing discussion about transitional housing around the state. That one will be a more complex conversation. But I think if you are staying up with current events of living through them in your community, you know that the need for transitional housing is great. The funding for transitional housing is not robust in the way that some other portions of the housing spectrum have been funded. And we're hopeful that the state will look kindly on LD 1721, use it as a vehicle to do something that that can gain majority support in the legislature and get funded and get the governor's support. The third priority is to help our region understand and respond to potential reforms in general assistance. General assistance is becoming a very hot topic in Augusta. because the price of general assistance to the state has increased by about fourfold, from about 10 million to about $40 million a year. Got their attention. Unfortunately, all the attention's not good. And some of the discussion in Augusta, and I'm sure some of you have had firsthand experience with this, is to punish urban centers for having too many homeless people. That is not a good thing. So recognizing this is a very diverse region and that not everybody has the same opinion about this topic, we want to keep this as a priority, just as we did last year, to make sure our members are informed and are talking to each other and are reaching as great consensus as they can around a really difficult issue. So short session, 3 priorities, all building on what we did last year, following the principles that we always follow, which is we ask you first before we go charging in, make sure that we have your approval, that we stay regional, we collaborate with Maine Municipal Association, so we're not trying to do somebody else's job, and that we remain nonpartisan. We're not interested in engaging in partisan debates. Happy to answer any questions. And looking forward to a brief and hopefully productive session next year.
So the session starts in January?
Yeah, and
January to April.
they go in December 1st, elect officers, and then start right after New Year's. Yep. I know it's thrilling.
Folks feel all right about these priorities?
Yes, I feel fine about it. I trying to, in my head, figure out what the other bills and carryovers are that, you know, I might have picked differently, but I probably wouldn't have.
Now, these are priorities, so if there are other things that come up during the session, and we'll of course bring it back for you to discuss, you know, we're gonna need to have more discussion around general assistance for sure, because I don't think our members are not all aligned on it. I think we're all aligned that there should be enough money, but to figure out some of the proposed changes, we need to make sure we're all, as Chris said, as much consensus as possible and staying purple on this issue, while also recognizing kind of the very big burden that some of our most urban areas have been, you know, experiencing. But we know that others are starting to get more and more encampments and other kinds of things like that outside of even the urban areas. So it is a spreading challenge. Okay.
There's no other comments, so I'll take a motion.
Thanks.
We have a second to approve the GPCOG advocacy priorities for 2024. Matt,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the adjustment to the loan fund. Would you like me to read that, or do you?
No, it's all right, I'll just brief
Yeah,
everybody.
sure.
So the staff is recommending that the executive committee authorize a withdrawal of $278,000 from the reserve fund to the GPCOG fund for the Finance Authority of Maine small business loans. We went to FAME, Chris Hall and Paul Johnson went to FAME in mid-September and requested that they recapitalize our loan fund because Paul has done a banner job of getting loans out the door. And FAME informed us that we should still have money left. And so when we went back and drove this to ground, we found we have a working theory that over 8 years ago, 8+ years ago, that more money was billed against that account for work done on that account than the account should have allowed. And so in order to put that money back to work for the region, we would like to put $278,000 in from the investment account. The investment account right now has $1.4 million. And the policy does not say what you can use it for, what you cannot use it for. We have done this kind of allocation from the investment fund to a loan fund in the past, so there's precedent for this action. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Question, but my understanding of the issue is we're really not reallocating it, we're just putting things where they should have been in the first place.
Yep. It's an internal transfer between accounts.
The police secretary's wage to the fire department for a while.
Yeah.
Screwed it up and somebody said, oh, that's the wrong place, that's why they were over there under, put it back.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah, Sherry.
Take it one pragmatic step further. Had the ineligible use of funding from the loan account not happened, the reserve fund would be that much lower right now. So we're really just making a correction of what should have happened and didn't.
We call them audit adjustments.
Question, how did this happen? I'm just,
So the GPCOG staff, we bill our hours against lots of different things. So I probably bill against 20 different grants every week. So maybe, yeah, probably. So I think what happened, but this is the working theory, Sue, is that the previous group that was here before Josh and me billed against the FAME loan account, which you're allowed to do so long as you're doing work on the FAME account and doing the loans, but they exceeded the amount that should have been available to bill against. And so, you know, that they made a billing error. Yeah.
So in many ways, though, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So in many ways, it's more conservative to replenish the account completely versus trying to go back and, let's say, reconstruct the billing scene to know exactly how many hours from X, Y, or Z. So it's cleaner just to do a one-to-one transfer and just make one account whole.
Yeah, I mean, we know the amount of money that we want to put in there. And so the cleanest way to do it is just put it in there and then get the money out into the loans. And Paul tells me that he's got a string of people that are all lined up to take that money once we put it back into the account.
And we know that, because FAME has records too, so we are able to be very precise about what the deficit was. So that's good, but going back to the records from 7, 8 years ago, or I don't think we could.
Will this be noted for this upcoming audit? I mean, I imagine we can make a notation about. Yeah,
That's a good point. I'll make sure that we explain it to the auditors.
Yeah.
My point was just gonna be that it should be noted if we do an expenditure of an unbudgeted, unplanned expenditure of $278,000, it should be noted by the auditors.
Yes, well, they should
And
find it too.
identified and explained to some
Yeah.
degree, and maybe a comment on the audit
Right.
report.
Yeah.
Because it isn't all, at some point, something went wrong.
Mhm.
My understanding is that it wasn't necessarily the activity was ineligible, but the amount exceeded, there was a maximum you could
Right.
spend on it, and they just exceeded that.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a
What
certain.
they were spending it for ineligible things technically, but it just had exhausted their availability for that period.
That's right. Yeah, that's what we believe happened.
so what do we have always in one place for now that this doesn't happen again, be the checks and the balances?
Excellent question. So we, for this account and for all of our small business accounts, we know exactly how much we're eligible to bill against it. And Josh keeps track of that and does that in a financial report for staff, and we don't exceed that amount. And so we just keep a very tight rein on our internal budgeting system. And so when we bill hours, every 2 weeks, Sue, we get a report from Josh of how many hours are billed against the eligible hours for every grant. And we, you know, when I first came on board, we had, I discovered we'd gone way over budget on a project that the city of Portland had contracted us for. And there wasn't any way to really understand that with the internal systems. So we had to build all of those internal systems, but they're now up and running with our internal budgeting.
Now, is that a report whether this, committee, could be provided with on a monthly basis, or how would we do it? Or
We can, it's some pretty huge spreadsheets,
okay.
but we do have something that may be more readable, which Josh is preparing for the November meeting packet.
Yeah.
And we call it our we need another name, cumulative budget summary. What it does is it shows you the grant amount, the amount that's expended against it, and the amount remaining. And, you know, we do fluctuate because we bill every 2 weeks. This is probably too much detail, but our project managers are really good about staying completely in budget now. We sometimes will go over by $1,000 or $2,000 on any given source, but it all evens out in the end. So, yeah, Tony,
Yeah,
please.
just to further elaborate on that and kind of give you a sense of the internal controls that are in place. I don't know what prior practice was, but I can tell you that everybody's timesheet is reviewed by somebody else, their supervisor, or in Christina's case, I review hers. And as she was saying, we have this spreadsheet that's updated bi-weekly by payroll for staff hours that are budgeted, and we review those. And if something is not budgeted or over budget, we flag it and just raise the question. There's usually a legitimate answer. Sometimes it's a mistake and there are corrections that are made, but there are multiple sets of eyes. And Josh is, you know, the final review on all of the timesheets. So those go through multiple layers of review before they're paid.
We haven't, since I've been here, there's been no issue like the one that we're trying to correct from before, Josh and me.
For a motion.
Yeah, does no one, any other comments before we go to a motion?
I'll move to authorize the transfer of $278,000 from the reserve fund to GPCOG's loan account, paying business loans. Second.
Sue?
Yeah.
Carmen?
Yes.
Gary?
Yeah.
Nat?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And I'm also yes.
Just need to call that a grant dashboard.
A grant dashboard, that's better.
Yeah.
That's way better. I'm gonna rename it. Thank you.
So
That's good.
next up is a strategic plan work session.
Yeah. Okay, so Danny's gonna put some slides up. We did a lot of outreach to get input from members, from community members, from partners. And I'm gonna give you the results today, and then I'm gonna ask you at the end, what stands out for you and what surprises you? And we'll use this input for the rest of the process, but today's workshop is just for you to hear what other folks said. And give me your reactions and say, okay, this is off base, or like double down on this one. So we'll go through to the next slide. So we did 2 surveys. We did one that got 100 responses with 38 members, and those could be counselors, mayors, boards of selectmen, managers, or staff from cities and towns, and also from transit agencies. We only had 1 transit agency, I think, respond, or 2 maybe. And of the 38 responses, 17 were from municipalities. And Lucy is going to pipe in and tell me if I'm getting anything wrong here, because she did all of the data aggregation for us. We also did a separate survey for staff asking some different questions, and I'll share with you what the staff thought in reaction to what the members said. And I'm really going to double down on what the members said first, because you're our primary audience and group that we're trying to serve. We also did 9 partner interviews, and you can read the folks that we interviewed here. This was usually with the director or a director of a big department within each of these agencies or organizations. So that's who we asked. The first one here tells us, if you're a member, which services did you use and how did you value them? And these are ranked by very important and important in terms of value. And you can see the gray lines that are on the right. That just shows you that they weren't used by those members. So sustainability planning came out at the top. And then grant support, which is actually really interesting to me, because we don't write grants for cities and towns right now. Sometimes we write grants, a regional grant that benefits a city and town. And we do a lot of advising and we put information out about grants. But I was surprised to see this one at the second. We have community profiles and data, transportation planning, of course, cooperative purchasing, land use, and it kind of goes down from there in terms of what people really used and valued. The next one is on activities. So we go to the next slide, Danny. So did you participate in these activities? And the gray bars, you didn't participate, but then you also rank the relative importance. And annual events came up at the top, which is good because we put a lot of time into them. PACS committees, those are just like, we have to do them. That's not going to change, but it's nice to know that people find them important. Some facilitation and training. This is, kind of a newer service that we've been doing. But people find that valuable. And then the peer exchanges, this is like, we have the sustainability directors roundtable, we have the public works roundtable, the managers roundtable, the chairs and vice chairs roundtable, the communication officers roundtable. So everybody who's like their own thing, I think we're 7 or 8 different roundtables for different staff members of organizations. And then it goes down from there. Then we asked, what are the roles and the brand. So actually what we asked was, what are the first 3 words that came to mind? We got a lot of things like transportation planning, stuff like that. I filtered that out to kind of get to, what do you see us as doing? And also, how do you see us? What do you think about us? And the biggest roles here are listed on the left. I don't think any of them would be stuff that hasn't been said before by all of you. The last one that's kind of blocked is support. And someone talked a lot about, you're in service, GPCOG is in service to folks. So these were the words that I kind of grouped into a theme. And then in terms of like our brand, what people think of like how we do our work or what we are, we heard a lot about our staff team, but being smart and competent and that kind of thing, but also that we're fairly easy to work with, which is good. And that we're inclusive. Some people talked about this in terms of racial equity and people with disabilities. Others said, you're really working with the community as a whole. So there are a couple themes in there. And then agile and trusted, these were less mentioned, but they're kind of at the bottom. Then we asked, what are our biggest strengths? And I've grouped these again. And this is what members said is on the left. So the biggest thing by far was that we provide the table for the region to talk to each other. People really seem to value that. They value that there's a big picture and a regional perspective, that there's communication that happens between municipalities because of COG, and then also outward from kind of GPCOG staff to the region about issues. This is also, I'm going to talk about this later. This is one of our biggest weaknesses too. So members talked about, yes, you're doing great communication. And members also talked about like, you got to do way better communication. So we heard both. Members also thought that our staff were important. They particularly mentioned political insight, that we were accessible, that we have resources, we're willing to help. And I think, what's the last part of that, Reid? Relationships within the region and credibility, yeah, with state leaders. And so the themes among partners were really similar, but I added some quotes in here to give you just a little texture. We heard that there's not a lot of folks that do that kind of broad convening across municipalities and up and down government levels, and also with partners. And that we're willing to think out the box. We were also by some of our partners told, hey, when you're thinking out of the box, make sure you're including us. So we heard that too. And we heard a lot about our reputation and trust, which I know has been some issues for some members about trust. And some of the community members were talking about, bureaucracy. So there's another flip side to that piece too. So that's the strengths. And then we go to weaknesses, which, because I always like to improve, I've got 2 slides instead of 1. So the first part were members, a very strong and consistent theme was that because our members are so diverse, and you all said this at the retreat also, that there are a lot of differences between our members. And so getting to a regional action or agreed upon solution is really challenging. And that sometimes what the region needs is not what individual members want. So there's a tension between what's good for the region versus what individual communities might be good for individual communities. And COG really can't act at all independently of our communities. And so that was noted as a constraint on our ability to act. And that we also have resource constraints because GPCOG is, and this is related to the first, because we're so reliant on member dues, it constrains that GPCOG really can't do anything that's outside of what all the members want. We also have some grant funded positions and we don't have enough funding. So those were cited by members. And then also, if you go to the right-hand column here, communication was another theme that we needed to do a lot better. People asked us to do a better job staying in touch with members, be more visible to the public, be more clear on how we support individual towns, quantify that value, which we tried to do for South Portland last year, but do that better. That our mission and our values not well understood, and that opportunities for grants and services need to be more regularly shared. A few folks, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough for me to put up here, said, you know, that COG is slow moving and bureaucratic. My guess is that mostly refers to PACs. I'm not sure, but that is a very defined federal process. And we have heard from PACs members before in PACs forums that they wish there was less bureaucracy and less process. A few folks said you're growing too fast, and you know, as you're growing too bureaucratic. Two members of the 38 or so said the cost is going up and the cost is a drawback for the member dues. And then this one politics. Okay, so this is interesting. One person was like, you're overly conservative. Somebody else was like, you're too blue. And then others were saying you're favoring growth over open space. So I don't think GPCOG is really immune from anything that's happening in any other forum that, you know, can't please everybody. But I did want to put it up here because a quote was, you're more politically driven than needs driven, which, you know, we try not to be that. All right, just kidding. Yeah, do we need to leave? Okay. All right, folks on Zoom, we're getting a fire alarm, so we're gonna have to pause here.
Should we just stay or go?
For a new season. Oh, wow. Oh, that's okay, okay. That's not the Chris usually does, yeah. Jerry has eaten, that's eaten. So. We're gonna. Yeah, but it's a good policy to get staff used to. Don't eat the food until it's on. Sometimes you just can't.
That wasn't my, I'm sorry.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Boy, this was an exciting meeting.
Yeah.
Man, this is just awesome.
You guys really know how to.
We know how to
go.
throw a fire, exactly.
I'm not cutting his meat, so I'll try to help you. Well, we all would have been, I was burned up. You know, but.
You can't open those windows, so.
Did I wait?
Like potato salad, and then would you get that?
Sturgis is, oh,
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
this.
I would imagine.
Bryant is gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
We lost them both.
I thought you were gone, then you came back,
No, I wasn't. gone.
Yeah.
Still here.
so.
Is this it?
Now we know.
I didn't mind being know when I pulled.
Only a few more slides left.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's just go back to him, I guess.
Another one.
Another weakness.
He
Yeah.
doesn't have to.
Oh,
More weaknesses. What? I don't think so. Everybody's gone online, right?
So,
Well, I
Vision
can't.
Zero, do you need this?
I do need that plan back.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
That's okay. They have, they have a lot of.
Can you send Carmen one when you can
I
actually
think
share?
this is
them?
everyone
Yeah.
left, right?
I think so, yeah.
Remember that.
Meeting.
Oh.
Yeah.
Shop,
It's a new one.
November, the board is selecting.
I get fired.
All I'm looking
I
at
get
is
to go off every time.
To just make sure nobody else is there. I texted Kate and Mark to tell them we were
There's 5 participants.
5 participants.
Can you just click on the arrow to see who the participants are?
They always go right to, we need track.
Well, I thought.
No, we don't need track. And I've been telling.
We have,
We wanna put one in, and I don't know.
Matt Pinville, Palmville, I don't see anybody.
Okay.
Terrible idea.
Yeah. I
I
texted Kate and Mark to say,
Okay, so, as everyone knows, we had to excuse ourselves due to a fire alarm. Given the time, we are going to adjourn through acclamation. Is that the right term? And Christina will follow up with an email for the rest of these slides and for us to send feedback regarding the strategic plan.
all right. You can tell me how surprised you are by these findings at the next meeting.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks all.
Good afternoon.